Welcome to Fox Sports League Legends, where we relive the fascinating history of rugby league through the eyes of the stars who helped build the game into the spectacle we enjoy so much. If you go back to the mid-1970s, the game belonged to the eastern suburbs. Easts became the pin-up boys of the game. Among them was arguably the biggest and fastest player the game had seen. A prodigal son who'd passed up the chance to keep playing American football to come home and be a Rooster again. Mark Harris, welcome to League Legends.
Thanks, Tim.
Now, in a way, your story is more fascinating even than Jarryd Hayne's, because the NFL came looking for you, didn't they? Now, why was that?
Well, it started out fairly innocuously because it wasn't generated here in Sydney. There's a radio program in Boston at the time called the Sports Huddle, but it wasn't small. It was huge. It was a 4-hour Sunday afternoon sports talkback show that was syndicated through an audience of about 32 million. So it was pretty big. And they had been telling the American people for many years that, you know, there were athletes outside continental USA that could play their game. And in fact, forcefully so. You know, they'd actually brought kickers over there to play, and were quite successful soccer players. And they came out here ostensibly looking for punters, and they ran a kicking competition through the Melbourne Age. And of course, once they got hold of it, they invited 480 Australian rules players and 2 rugby players. As far as the Roosters and were concerned, it just started out as a minor inconvenience, really. I asked them if I could go down there and compete because I'd been invited, and they said OK. And the prize was $1,000 and a tryout with the Boston Patriots. That was where it all started. The guy that won the prize and got the tryout was this reserve grader from Adelaide named Des Lay. He was about 110 pounds and he had an average of 52 yards. I'd gone into the final with an average of 67 yards, so it wasn't really what they were looking for, and the sponsors were out here at the time, but they saw the whole thing, and they approached me afterwards, and on behalf of the Boston Patriots, they offered me a contract to go over there, because then it got a bit serious up in Sydney, because they offered me $25,000, and of course that was unheard of.
What were you being paid at the Roosters at the time?
5,000.
5 times the money? 5
times. I mean, see, if to understand where I was at that time, you have to put yourself in my shoes, you know. It wasn't a small amount more. I mean, if someone came to you and asked you, you know, to do pretty much what you're doing somewhere else and offered you 20 or 30% more money, you would have to give it some thought. But what if they offered you 5 times the money, you know? So it wasn't like I had playing American football on my bucket list, you know. I had, when I was in high school, I dreamt about a sporting scholarship in the States and everything like that, but I'd long since stopped thinking about that. Rugby league was really firmly entrenched in my heart. I'd already represented my country, and that's all I saw in front of me. But this just came like a bolt from the blue, and there it was. So what do you do? And of course it got really serious because I really started to give it some consideration, because I was engaged to Maureen at the time, and you know, we wanted to start a life, and that sort of money was a tremendous boost, all in one go. And
yeah, people would wonder, because it's the end of 1972, isn't it? And you know, you've played in a grand final, you've played in a World Cup, the league world is at your feet, and I guess the Roosters are entitled to want you to stay.
They'd been everything for me, you know. They taught me to be an elite football player, and my teammates too. They were told not to talk to me, and I think that sort of tipped it for them. And Johnny Brass arranged with Jeff Sale down at the rugby club to get a room out the back prepared, and the team took Maureen and I down there in secret and gave us a farewell. And that, to me, lifted a huge weight off my shoulders because, you know, I owed them everything too.
Now, the Patriots fly you to Boston on the word of the radio host Eddie Andelman, and the first thing you do is outrun their second-round draft pick, and that's great and embarrassing for him, but it was nothing compared to when they got you to punt the ball. Tell us about that.
Everything about that kick was perfect. It never moved in the air. It just had so much English on it. It went 93 yards on the fly and landed. It was a sort of a horseshoe stadium, and we were 65 yards from the goal line, and the actual horseshoe was about 25, 30 yards behind that. And it landed, went over the top of the goalpost and landed in the stand. And the chairs, it ran in amongst the chairs and it didn't come out, it just stayed there, stayed there. And Eddie Andelman looked at the coaches and looked at me, and he raced into the clubhouse to see if he could get a tape measure, and he came out and measured it, 93 yards. So, I mean, I kicked some big kicks over there, but never one like that, you know. So, I mean, often, you know, probably was the finest thing I ever did as an athlete. But that was a pretty good time to do the perfect kick. So that sort of opened them up a little bit. There was a 4.9 second hang time on the kick, so they liked that.
How did you end up in Montreal from there?
I was in camp and I was going along. They were cutting. They start with about 110 and they cut down to 47, and I think I was 54. And the CEO of the Montreal Alouettes, he rang Andelman and said, I'll give him $10,000 more to play for the Montreal Alouettes than he's getting at Philadelphia. So at 54, they called me in and they said, look, Montreal has expressed an interest in you. Your options here will be on one of our farm teams, which is a big step down, or sitting on the bench all year. If we trade you to Montreal, you'll get to play. So I got to go. Next thing, I'm on a plane to Montreal. So I arrive at Montreal and they meet me there and give me $12,500. Still haven't done anything. And I sent that home. Now, Maureen was getting all of this money. I played this game, and I was sat with this J.O. Albrecht, the general manager, and his assistant in this box right up on top of the grandstand, and he kicked off, and the guy carried it all the way back for a touchdown, and the kicker was headed for the sideline. And I nearly jumped out of the box. I said, I'd kill that guy.
Why doesn't he tackle him?
Why don't he tackle him? They put me on as a kick-off specialist, which I did for the rest of the year. I was in no position to demand to do. I just did what they gave me. And well, I think I had the best averages at the end of the season for a kick-off specialist, but I thought that was terrible. And that because I thought I'd let them down, you know.
So you end the 1973 season with them, and they make an offer for you to stay. Why did you come home?
I knew I could go back there and probably be a kicker forever, but I didn't want to. I mean, it's terrible just sitting on the bench and just going out on the field and kicking. I wanted to be in the game. The press got onto it because I was doing very well at practice receiving and running backs and taking plays and carrying the football. But they got down on the coach for not giving me a play, sending me out with a play just to see what I could do. And I gave him a real hard time. I'd go into his office and he was a great coach. You know, Marv Levy, I don't know if you know, he coached the Buffalo Bills to 4 Super Bowls. And I'd go into his office and say, Marv, you've got to give me a run, mate. I played for Australia, you know. He'd just laugh.
Played for Australia, mate.
Yeah, he said, Mark, we think about it next year. The problem is I'd been there at the beginning and I'd gone through pre-season camp at Philadelphia, and the coaches just didn't have time for me, and I knew that I needed really one-on-one intensive coaching to just bring me up to speed with everything. It was too hard to have to think about it because time, you don't have the time, but I had to think about everything. Jared was the same. You know, as much as he studied, he still had to think about everything that cost him fractions of a second. At Montreal, I thought maybe if they come to me and said, well, look, we'll get you with this guy who knows what he's talking about during the off-season, you get a job here in Montreal, I would have thought about it, you know, because, I mean, there it was. You saw the contract at 1974, $25,000. I could have gone back. But at the end of the season, everybody just disappeared. And, like, we all got paid and all the coaches, everyone just disappeared. There was no one to talk to. They weren't there. And so I thought, well, you know, what's going to happen is next year I'll come back and I'll have to go through pre-season camp and they won't have time to coach me and I'll be about where I am now. And I may still not get on the field. So I really had a decision to make. We wanted to, you know, have children settle down and I thought probably the best place to do that is Australia. So I sort of came back. I mean, I was always going to come back to the Roosters.
Drama. Oh my word.
Every test match, live in 4K Ultra HD.
What a rivalry.
Because they count on you, count on it. Australia's only 10-year warranty with 10 years cap price servicing. Mitsubishi 1010. You can count on it.
Knock, knock.
Whether your Christmas is small or big, Coles is making great...
Today only, buy a ticket in draw 401 for a chance to win a $12.5 million apartment complex and you'll automatically be entered into a bonus draw offering 5 $1,000 cash prizes. Hurry, tickets selling fast.
You originally went to the Roosters from Papua New Guinea, so they didn't know a lot about you when you turned up, did they?
Not true. They didn't know anything about it. But the few in the club did. I'd gone up there originally on a holiday with a schoolmate and ended up staying there 2 years, and I got playing with my schoolmates who lived up there, and I was playing league for the Connie Tigers. And unbeknownst to me, Ian Craigie, who was the son of the then president of the Roosters board, was a percussionist. He was up there playing in a band and he used to go to the footy, and he saw me play and he wrote to his father. I get this letter from Las Vegas offering me a money contract to play with the Roosters. That was 69. Ron Jones and Buster were over in Las Vegas signing up acts for the Leagues Club, and that's where the letter came from. I thought, what?
They thought you were a forward though, didn't they?
They took me out to the Leagues Club when I first arrived, and nobody knew anything. As I say, nobody knew anything about me. And another great old stalwart, Clicker Clark, was working in the basement when I came in, and he took one look at me and his eyes lit up. And he said, "Oh, come in, Mark," because he thought the club needed forwards. And he said, "Come in and look, are you hungry?" And he raced up to the dining room and he came back with a steak like that and about that thick on a plate. And he sat me down and put that in front of me. And he says, "Oh, there, get that into you. We need to build you up a little bit." And he said, "By the way, what position do you play, prop or second row?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a centre, Clicker." he grabbed the steak and it just disappeared.
He
I never
took it
saw him
away.
again. He said, "You're too heavy."
Mark, 1972 was a massive year for you, wasn't it?
Before we went away, the Australian Rugby League put us with George Dawley for nearly a month.
He's the renowned fitness coach. Yeah.
Oh, he's an animal.
Yeah.
George was the hardest.
Changi
condition.
survivor, all of
Yeah.
that, wasn't
Oh,
he? Yeah, he was an incredible person.
What a story. And by the end of that month, we were doing things that we just didn't know we could. And on the last day, it was always the killer day with George. It separated you into equal weights, you know. You had a partner who was about your weight. I could never get a halfback. I got Arthur. And,
Arthur Beetson. Yep.
And we went around there and he said, all I want you to do is piggyback your mate up to the top of those stairs at Lady Macquarie's chair there, 10 times. I piggybacked Arthur Beetson to the top of those stairs 10 times. He piggybacked me 10 times. And then we were all laying on the ground. We were gone. Tommy Raudonikis and Lurch came past in the back of a ute. I think it was there.
And you went on tour. You were Arthur's roomie, weren't you?
Yeah.
What can you tell us about Arthur Beetson?
And I made the big mistake of surrendering. I couldn't go anywhere. I had the ball and I surrendered in the tackle and Arthur just wrapped me in a bear hug like that. And he was practising this tackle. My feet were off the ground and Arthur started to lean forward and we were in the middle of this cricket pitch that had been all chopped up and then dried out, you know. And I'm kind of looking down like this and he started to lean forward and just as he reached the sort of tipping point, he jumped, he put one leg behind my legs and he jumped up from the ground. He was so strong, Arthur. He jumped up off the ground and he kicked back and my feet sort of went out in front and I'm sort of parallel to the ground, about 3 feet off the ground, and I'm looking up at Arthur and he's just grinning and gravity did the rest. Bang, onto that cricket pitch. I'll never forget that. And then I felt it for months.
You got to know him pretty well, didn't you?
Well, we were all very close then. And he was, I mean, I wouldn't be the only one with the opinion that Arthur might be the best. They didn't know him at all. I mean, he was intense, really. And he got a lot more serious when he came to the Roosters. And when he got serious, well, he was just on another plane. He was, if he wasn't the best, he was, you know, I don't know, that's a matter of opinion, but he was certainly the most valuable player I ever saw to a team.
So in 1974, you're part of this Roosters team. You've got the coach who
Would take the ball up and there'd be 3 guys waiting for a pass from that, and because he'd take 3 blokes to the ground with him. Well, that leaves a huge hole in the defence, and we just ran into it, and that kind of got used to doing that. There'd be and sort of there was nowhere we had a real weakness. I don't think we had great wingers. We had, you know, we could make holes in the centres and fullbacks that did come. Russell Fairfax and Ian Schubert could come through the middle.
Jack Gibson, that was his first premiership in 1974.
Well,
yeah, that was his first title. What was it about him?
Well,
Mark?
he was an innovator, Jack. It was different than other coaches before him. You know, it was basically new school against versus old school. But Jack brought a whole new type of professionalism to. He came and discipline too. You know, I mean, his first statement to us was, "Put away your scrapbooks, boys."
There's a famous photograph of you playing for Australia. Graham Langlands is worried about you. You're leaning over and your nose is all over your face. And indeed, it's one of rugby league's most famous noses. But there's a story earlier than that about it, isn't there?
I was 18 and I was a forestry cadet, going to be a forestry ranger, and I was playing rugby in Gympie in Queensland. From that, they selected a team to trial for the Queensland rugby team. It's called a possibles versus probables, and I was picked in that as one of the possibles, you know, and I was playing in this trial. Halfway through the second half, I was hurling downfield, and next minute my feet kept going and my head stayed where it was. And I was on the ground on my back and semi-conscious, and I'd got one right across the nose. And I was had to drive back to Gympie that night after the game, and I blacked out on the way, and my car ran off the road and I smashed up the car. I was okay. I was bruised, but I wasn't hurt any more. But I must have had a concussion or so. But that wasn't the end of it. I actually got a septal infection because it was my nose was a sort of a mess, and I had to go into hospital. I was in hospital for 2 weeks, so I got control of the infection. And of course, when I come out and it all settled down, I had a nice flat nose because they had to remove some of the cartilage. It hadn't been broken, but it was messed up. So I had a bit of the think about what I was going to do with my life after that. But I sort of come to the realisation that, well, you're going to have to do two things. You're going to have to grow up and you're going to have to get tough.
Mark, not many NRL players have ridden a bobsled or even a skeleton, which seems a little bit more insane, but you have. How did that happen?
Oh, well, I'm not one for winter sports, but my father was a pilot. He flew for Swissair and lived in Zurich. And because I was over there after the World Cup tour in 1972, I flew back to Zurich to spend some time with him. And we went up to St Moritz, where he was a member of the St Moritz Tobogganing Club, the skeleton, you know. And I sort of got the opportunity through him to ride it, and that, which was, you know, terrific. I went down the run about 4 times. But if you know what the skeleton is, it's just a little...
It's a dinner tray.
About the size of a dinner tray with a sliding platform on it and 2 rails. And you go... it's the sensation of speed is like no other because your chin's about that far off the ice. Everyone who rides it becomes a member of what they call the Shuttlecock Club. And the Shuttlecock is the name of a bend about halfway down, which is not banked too steeply, and it's like a horseshoe, so that if you're not a good rider, you just don't negotiate it, you know. So the first time through, when you've got your spikes dug in, you don't have a problem with it. But after 3 or 4 times, you start feeling your oats and you want to go down fast. And of course, that I did. And I took off. And of course, as soon as I got to the Shuttlecock bend, I just went straight out. And that's why they call it the Shuttlecock bend, because that's what you look like. You
like down to the ground, yeah.
And they've got all straw and snow piled up there. And that. It's a real big deal. Everyone's a member. And they have a ball in London called the Shuttlecock Ball every year.
In 1972, you were Arthur Beetson's roomie on the World Cup tour. Any good stories?
Well, we did a lot of promotional stuff. And one of the things we did was we went to the Folies Bergère as guests of the French Rugby League. And that was a great show and everything like that. And they wanted to do, this is where I got involved and got into trouble. We wanted to do a promotional shot after the show. And the head girl came down and there were about 5 of us at the front of the stage, and she picked me out probably because I was the prettiest and plunked herself on my shoulder. But she's topless, you know, and beautiful and all that. She had a peacock feather train about 20 feet long behind her. And they took the shot, and that, which was, you know, was for the French papers. Unbeknownst to us, somebody threw it on the wire and it was picked up back here in Australia. In itself, that wasn't really a problem for me, but what happened after that became a problem for all of us because nobody made any arrangements for us to get back to the hotel, and none of us knew where it was from the Folies Bergère. They got us there, and then they said, well, you can get home. And so, you know, some people tried to walk back, some people got on the underground, a couple of the players ended up 300 miles away. As only Arthur can do, he got himself into an argument with some bloke, and all of a sudden there were 5 thugs there, all with knives. So Arthur took we only found out later, and Arthur took off, and they all chased him. And what happened, he ran into they were sorting mail in a post office, sorting mail at night in the post office. He ran in with all of these mail sorters, And these thugs didn't want to come in there with their knives, so they waited for him outside, and he was sort of trapped there. And of course, this is like 12 o'clock comes along. 12:05, Harry arrives at our room. Where's Arthur? And I said, oh, look, I just saw him down the hall. He was going in a shower. Right? Every 10 minutes after that, Harry arrives looking for Arthur, you know, and Arthur's bailed up in this post office, you know, and all these other guys, I mean, all these other guys are out in the bush somewhere, and because they got lost. They got lost walking back. Most people sort of, I think the last one got back about 4 in the morning. But the last time Harry visits the room, he says, Mark, tomorrow Arthur's going home and you're going with him. Oh, that's what he's
going to send you home.
Yeah, oh yeah. And of course, what happened after, because Ernie Christiansen was there in the press, and they sort of got onto this, you know, and the story in the Australian papers was, you know, defying the curfew, disciplinary measures are going to be taken, out on the town all night, wild night on the town, I think was the line. And of course, this is what in the back of the Sun, Maureen got up to, right? We were engaged and Maureen rang me and she cried for 10 minutes. Or rang me collect and cried for 10 minutes on the phone. And that wasn't necessary, you know, and none of it was our fault. I mean, when Harry found out what happened to Arthur, he laughed so hard I think he forgot about sending us home. And I think they just rushed at it too quick because it was just it wasn't a wild night on the town. We were all lost. And I think the Sun printed an apology and that sort of settled Maureen down after that, but I was a bit worried there. As far as the tour was concerned, the damage was already done. We had lost that edge we had because of the training with George, and we got the Poms had a good team and they beat us in that first game. And at the end of that tour, there was just it lives in my mind, you know, because we watched the Poms go away, and up in the back window there's Johnny Gray and Mike Stevenson with the World Cup trophy sitting up there between them. And we worked so hard to get that, and we had to watch it go away. Yeah.
Mark, you really have had one hell of a career and a great story. Thanks for sharing it with us on League Legends.
Thank you.
This has been a Fox League production.